Hey all, I'm just back from Asia, 19 days of teaching, and I am jet lagged. So I'm going to do my best today to give you a little free tutorial Friday because I've missed the last, I think the last 3 Fridays. Two, 3 Fridays? Three, I think. Anyway, let's get to it. This is a demo I did while teaching actually in Shanghai. And it's going to be a car rendering. We're going to do it inside a indoor studio setup. And I'm just going to walk through some of the layers so you can see what one of these renderings looks like. So it first starts out with drawing from my sketchbook. So something like that. So there's one of my sketches right out of my sketchbook, and I'm going to turn down the opacity. This rendering is just going to show you all the layer structure more than anything. So I'm just going to leave that line drawing on the top. So usually what I do is first thing, let's put a new layer here, and I'm just going to make it a bit darker so you can see all the paths. So first step I would do is to go here and redo the whole rendering with paths. So you can see they're all on one layer, and by putting them all on one layer it allows me to draw them right up next to each other, and it makes it very easy to line them all up. If you don't put it on one layer, then you can't sort of see them all next to each other. So I find putting it on one layer and then just going back and selectively picking the ones that you need to fill and establish your layer structure is an efficient way to work. So there's that, and let's kill this one. So it starts with a line drawing, and you just put it on multiply. All right, first thing I do is start making layers. So actually the first thing I did was I blocked out the environment a little bit. So it's an indoor studio setup. I'm just going to have one big overhead light and shining soft light straight down on the vehicle, and a dark studio around with maybe a little bit of a vertical wall. And so I darken down the environment a bit just so I have some more value around it. And then I'm going to do top lighting on the body. So there's kind of the basic simple rendering. This is a bit scruffy and loose, as I stated. I think this rendering ran about 2 hours, start to finish. So we're going to just turn on the layers as we go, and I'll talk about the bits and pieces. So the first thing is to take the body and set up your layers with your paths. And so let's block in, there's a little soft cast shadow from the light above, and there's the interior. And the interior is just lit sort of straight above, and it's just scruffed, really scruffy quick paint in there. There's the original tires, there's the wheels, wheel centers there, and I didn't really block out the design in there because I'm actually going to cut and paste some photographed wheels at the end. I also added a little bit of blue to the environment, so like there's a blue light shining on that dark wall. And let's go here, a couple more details. See if I can make this a little bit larger. We don't really need this, so let's look at that. So it started out first was just probably looked a lot like this, just monochromatic. Now a big thing that if you want to make something a color, typically when we render our things in grayscale, we tend to use a lot more of the value range of the value scale because we're trying to get the form to read by changing the values. So if you have the values sort of a bit stronger like this to really show the form, and you try to colorize that, Command U will colorize, you'll get basically, if I want to do a red car, I'm only going to get pink, and that's because it's the wrong value to be red. What I mean by that is that this value of red, okay, which is like a 3 or something, is going to only give you pink. If you want a rich saturated red, your light side needs to be down in here, like a value, 4 or 5. So if you wanted to make this a red car, what you'd have to do to this value is you'd have to go to Command L, go to Levels, take your white point and pull it down, okay, to a value 4 or 5. And then if the rest of it's getting too dark, take your midtones and readjust them Okay, and you're basically trying to get your values to be closer together. So the light side in the brightest area gets down to a value 4 or 5. Then you pull your grays down as well. So you're just trying to get the range closer, and that's really more a true depiction of a matte surface. And so now if I was going to colorize that, okay, and now I would get a saturated red on the light side. And I can still see the form. So when colorizing from a grayscale, that's an important thing to remember. If you want to learn what value is a color, take a color photograph and open it into Photoshop and make it a grayscale, and then pick the value in the light side of the color that you want to try and render, and you'll learn what its true value is. And then when you adjust your grayscale, it'll make all the difference. So basically that's all I've done here, and I've done a little color dodge to give it a bit of a metallic look. So here it would be, let's make it color underneath so we can end up with a glossy, we'll end up with a glossy car and a metallic car. We'll do them both kind of orange. So let's look at something like that. Okay, I'll leave that one the way it is. And then here it would be kind of a strong metallic. So I've increased the contrast and I've done a little color dodge. You see it's done quite loosely, but you'll see it comes together and starts to look photoreal by the time we're done. Just added a couple little details here and there. Some edging around the windows. And glass, here's the glass. So I like to do glass. If I'm going to tint glass, I like to put it on a multiply layer. So that would be it painted, like say it was a dark brown. Okay, and if I wanted to tint that, I would do multiply and then just turn down the opacity, as much tinting as you want. In this case it's dark on dark, full dark interior. We don't see through the windows to a lighter background or anything. So but in this case I wanted to colorize the glass, and to do that I like to use either hard light or overlay. Hard light works well when it's very light behind the glass, but if it's dark, overlay is better. Because when you do the hard light, it looks like it's a bit too opaque, and it's not just tinting all the color, but it's actually changing it. It looks like it's too frosted and foggy, and you'll never get there if you do normal. If you do normal and you just try to change the opacity, it's going to always look way too hazy, like it's frosted. But if I do overlay, you see that it's still quite crisp and we can see through the glass. That's much better. So that's the one I went with, overlay, to get that kind of blue glass. A couple more details. These are just matte surfaces, so just matte surface rendering on those. And that is about it. There's some wheels. Just cut and paste those out of a photograph I took. And I took, when I pulled these out of the photograph, I tried to find some that were very close to the right degree so that the offsets and everything would be correct. It's important when you're cutting and pasting wheels or any ellipses that have offset that you try to make them the right, find some that are close to the right degree. Okay, let's see. Well, it's time for reflections. Now, it looks pretty basic. All right, and so the first thing I would do is apply. Let's get rid of that old mask. And this one, I wasn't even using those. Okay, so I'm going to say there's an overhead light box. I'm not going to go into how to plot these things, how to locate them, except to say that when you do guess at where your line of sight is bouncing up to this big reflective light box, the thing that's most important is you just make the reflection consistent. And what I mean by that, let's see, let's kill this one, put a new one on there, new layer mask. What I mean by that is that this might not be a light box. Let's see, what did I just do? I think I just applied it. Sorry, hang on. Let me go back a couple. This is probably my jet lag. It's not helping me out here. Stop. Okay. let's take that one and delete it. Hang on. I just need to get rid of this. Sorry, I'm struggling. You can tell my brain is foggy today. Well, let's just, you know what? I still want it there. So let me paint it back out, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's it, and it really just looks like a big decal if it's all the same strength, same opacity. So what I mean by having it be the same reflection is that this light box that's being reflected in the top could be actually a skylight and not an actual light. And it might have some beams or something that run through the middle of it. It could have something like that, and we could have beams running this way, blocking our view of the overhead skylight. So if this is a reflection over here on the fender of the same light source, right, being that skylight, then you would want to repeat that same pattern across there. So you can have any, obstructions looking into that, and what you'd want to do is make sure that wherever it reflects that light box, right, you see those same obstructions. And I'm just loosely doing it here, but that's the idea. Okay, and then your brain will start to put it together and believe that it's actually an overhead skylight with some beams or something running through it. So that's what you do. Now, what I did, it's a little bit different than that, is that I'm going to change the gradation in it like it's an overhead skylight. I have skylights here in my studio that are frosted plexiglass. I mean, the light shines on it from the outside. It gets hot spots. So one side can be much brighter than another. And they're kind of domed, so you could really end up with a hot spot in it. So what I'm going to do here is, let's put a little layer on top, something I write some notes with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to erase off one side of it, and I'm going to erase off another side and another. And the reason I'm going to introduce gradations, right, this direction, is that I know that when the human brain interprets form, it's because of value change. So if I can incorporate a value change into this reflection, and I can justify it by saying the light's shining, and making a hot spot in my skylight above, then that's going to help the form read more with the strength of the reflection. So let's see what I did for that mask. So that mask looks like that. And if, let's see, it's 100%. So here it is off. And here it is the layer mask. And it doesn't take much to make something look reflective. So you can always paint that back again and bring back more of the reflection, but it doesn't take much again. So that's where I'm going to start it. The next one I added, no, that's the old one. Next one I added was this, and the idea here, actually next one was probably this one. Let's turn it all the way up. Okay, which is a reflection of the wall. And so I took the same color and value that was on the wall behind the vehicle, and I'm saying that this wall goes up just out of frame, and then it has a hard edge, and then above that wall, behind it, is light white wall again. So then I'm going to have this extending beyond. And so if I turn off this layer mask, you see that this one, and they're all just set to normal, all these clear coat reflections. And you see that this one is just the base paint, and I just painted a little bit of white right above the reflection of the wall that's behind the vehicle. And then I added a layer mask, right, that only left the little white area. And then for the wall itself, there it is. So if it was chrome, for instance, it might look something like that, but that doesn't look very real. So my layer mask introduces a bit of Fresnel effect across the hood, and you can see now it's still too reflective, and that's where I turn down the opacity. Okay, and you can see it takes very little opacity and the true color of what it's reflecting to make it look shiny. And I did the same for the ground plane. So the ground plane is just basically white, and I've taking a guess at where it reflects. And let's turn it all the way up. So if I did it just like that, it would look like chrome, but it almost looks like a two-tone car and looks, like it's almost painted. So what I did was I erased it based on the Fresnel effect, and I'm not going to go into detail in a short tutorial what that is. That's all fully explained in my Schoolism class. I'll put a little in the description. I'll put a little link out to that website. But I have like 18 hours of lecture explaining how to plot reflections and introduce the Fresnel effect, etc. But I think it's still very helpful to share with you the layering structure and how to do indoor studio setup. It's also a lot like the bicycle I did for the Gnomon workshop. It's like that indoor bicycle rendering tutorial. Same layer setup, just this vehicle is, not a bike, but something with 4 wheels. So here's the layer mask, and then it was still a little too opaque, so I turned down the opacity. It was somewhere around there. And that's, you can make a case for it being, you could actually make a case for it, to be honest, something like this, like almost chrome finish. Or you can make a case for that. You could also make a case for this. So it really, all various levels of reflectivity depending on the paint quality. So you can sort of justify any of that. There's just a little bit of glare in the window. And the last thing I saw on this was that I thought the back of the car was disappearing a little bit into the background. So I went back here and just added a little bit, a little more light on the ground plane behind. And that's pretty close. Looks like there's a weird discoloration in that hole. I didn't clean that up well on my layers. Okay, and now we're up to adding some cut lines just on a layer set to normal. And I thought the focus as well for my rendering could be improved a little bit. So I just put a multiply layer on top, and I thought the corner here is a little bit too hot. So I just darkened it down a little bit, bring the focus back into the center of the image and the vehicle. And then I did a little color balance, also on a layer mask, just through the middle. So there if it's the whole image, and then here it's been painted so that the effect of the color balance is just happening through the center. And the last thing I did to sort of harmonize it was add a photo filter over the top of the whole thing, just to bring the colors back together a bit. The very last tweak that I did was actually to the color of the car itself, I should say. Let's turn off this color balance. What I did was I took this layer, and I think I'm just going to duplicate that. And to get a little bit more temperature change through the colors, let's recolorize it. Okay, and turn up the saturation. Let's get it sort of back to that orange. Let's start with something like that. Okay, then what I did was Command B, which will take you to color balance, and I can now shift the colors based on value. So I'm going to say the highlights are going to go warmer, more yellow, more red. Midtones also a little bit more red, but then in the shadows I'm going to go cyan, maybe even a little bit of blue. And so I'm actually getting a huge temperature change from the light side, right, through the mid values to the darks. And so it's actually multiple colors now making up my values, which makes it much more interesting than just that. All right, so if I do, well, that was the original. Let's go do it one more time. Command U, colorize. Now it's just one color. Let's turn up the saturation. Let's get us back to something similar like this. That would be just like glossy paint. Actually a little bit of metallic, I'm sorry, but just sort of monochromatic, so just one color. And let's do Command B, highlights. Let's warm them up a little more. Let's warm them up a lot. Midtones warmer as well a little bit, but shadows going towards the opposite. A little cyan, a little blue. Maybe too much. Something about like that. And now let's look at the difference between the two. There's the monochromatic one, and here's the one that's had the color balance shifted. So you can see it gets a little more interesting. So I'm going to go back to this one, and that is about it. Let's see, those are my schematics. Little color balance over the whole thing, little photo filter. And that's really about all there is to it for this week. I just wanted to show you some layers, show you some of the things I've been doing in Asia, and that it doesn't take much to make something look reflective. If we turn off the reflections, that's pretty straightforward. Started with a value scale, did a little metallic color dodge to it, then added the reflection of the environment with these 4 layers, and that was about it. And of course, you can change the opacities of those to increase the reflectivity sort of as you like. And so, right, we can push that up to reflect more of the wall color, or take it down, or we can take this up to reflect more of the light wall behind that. All right, so really your preference, and it's about how much do you want to see the color of the underlying paint versus the reflection that lives on the clear coat. The beauty of setting up your layers this way, if somebody wants a different color car, right, or product, anything you've rendered, no big deal. Oh, here's what it would look like. Glossy paint. Let's maybe change the, let's just darken it down a little bit. Push the contrast a tick. So if it was glossy paint, it would look like that. And you want to change the color, no big deal. All the layers are set up, change color all day long, none of your reflections change. So that's the beauty of rendering it on multiple layers, because all your reflections do live on the clear coat and your base paint is a separate layer. So you can do that. You can also do it in the metallic one, of course. Same thing, Command U, pick any color for the car you want. All the reflections stay the same. So that is about it. If you really want to get into depth and really master the subject, the best thing I can suggest is hit the Schoolism class. So obvious promo for that today, but wanted to show you how I build out the layers and make these sort of things. The underlying discussion and lecture about plotting the reflections, the schematics look something like that. So you can see that's most of the lecture time was in Asia was about plotting those reflections. But this is the layer strategy. This is how you balance those things, and I hope you find that helpful. I will hopefully be recovered soon from my jet lag, and I can get back into some more original live demos. Let's see, I do have Comic-Con coming up next week, so it might take me a bit of time to get back into the rhythm of my free tutorial Fridays. But thanks for tuning in, and have a great week.